I thought that was your nuance. Oh, my bad. We have an hour, yeah. So. 1 hour? Yeah, we have multiple speakers, right? Okay. We start? Yeah, start. I think they want us to stay because the camera's. Oh, I mean, it's not up to you, I guess.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أمن هو قانت آناء الليل ساجدا وقائما يحذر الآخرة ويرجو رحمة ربه قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome to this live show, and I hope inshallah that will benefit from that. My name is AHMED GHAZALI. I will be moderating this session, and I hope inshallah you will learn a lot, hopefully, and we'll just go in a way that is not the formal way. So I will inshallah start by introducing the speakers, then I will inshallah ask everybody to give you just a 5-minute presentation about the topic. And our topic today is about pursuing life goals while keeping up with the faith. I work in education, so I really learned something in education that is very important. What is it that we want to achieve from this session? That's a very fundamental question that we should always ask ourselves. Once I leave this session, what should stay with me? So I will ask this question to our speakers here to start with. So if I may start with the speakers here, Ahmed MUSTAFA, who's a youth activist, worked as a youth director, and currently is on the MSA National Board. And then I have brother SULEIMAN HANI, or Sheikh SULEIMAN, who serves as a resident scholar in Michigan and at Maghrib Institute. He's a scholar and a student at Harvard University studying religion. He did his master's degree in Islamic studies from the University of Jordan. Then I have Sister KAMEELAH RASHAD, who is a founder and president of Muslim Wellness Foundation, and she's finishing her doctorate degree in clinical psychology in Chestnut Hill College. I welcome them and welcome you, and let's get started. So first thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to sit close to them and we'll have that initiated inshallah. So I want every one of you in just less than a minute to tell me what is it that you want the people here to leave the session with. Ahmed?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So I think in general, we live in a very robotic state. We wake up in the morning, we take a shower, we go to work, we finish work, we go home and we eat. I think sometimes we don't really reflect to think, why was I created? What is the purpose in this life? SULEIMAN says something very beautiful. We shouldn't be concerned what people think of us when we pass away. Rather, we should focus on how we were resurrected when we meet Allah. So if anything we can accomplish is that after this talk show is, what are we trying to do in this life? Instead of living that robotic state, can we think about what we're doing and what kind of purpose we have in life, why Allah created us? So that's my perspective, and hopefully we can accomplish that.
Thank you, Brother SULEIMAN.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One of the objectives, I hope and I'm optimistic, will be fulfilled inshallah in one way or another, is to realign one's goals, one's commitments, the objectives that people have in life. All of those should be realigned towards our purpose. And if we believe with conviction that we were created with a purpose and that we will return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we see people of all walks of life dying all the time, all around the world, knowing that there is death and that it is a reality. Therefore, as we reflect on the afterlife and on the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we want to realign the goals, the commitments, whether it's something that takes up 5 or 10 years or something that is minor of a distraction, so that we can remove any type of illusion, any type of heedlessness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we are realigned towards our purpose. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Sister KAMEELAH?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. One thing, inshallah, that I hope you're able to get from this session is the ability to begin to think about how we develop a practice of self-reflection. And in that self-reflection, beginning to think about how we integrate our daily activities, the things that we do, just on a consistent basis, the things that we may do, I think, as you mentioned, in a very robotic way. But we begin to think about all of our activities. Are they purposeful? Are they intentional? Are they done even in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are we able to say that these are the activities that I hope will grant me a place in Jannah, inshallah? And so if we begin to think about how we can align our behaviors with our words, with our actions, all of those things, to have a purpose, faithful, kind of values-driven life, then inshallah we'll be able to derive a sense of contentment and of peace in the path that we have decided and chosen for our lives.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. And now let's get a few minutes from each speaker, inshallah. Make it as short as possible, no more than 5 minutes. That's a talk show. So please, let's get started with Ahmed.
All right, Bismillah. So the title of the talk show is Pursuing Life Goals. So I thought about it and I'm like, okay, we are a product of this society. The Declaration of Independence says the pursuit of happiness. So I'm thinking about it and then I said to myself, what is happiness? So it's an easy question, but it's a hard answer. So a few years back, and I promise to be short, I found this documentary on Netflix called Happy. It's like drawn up on a cloud. It's called Happy. And so the psychologist decided to look at this documentary and he said, instead of focusing on what makes people depressed, I am going to focus on what makes people happy. And he travels throughout the world, the slums of India, he goes to the central of Japan, he goes to Brazil, and he comes out with the 3 things: family, community, and doing good. He says, if you do these 3 things, you will be happy. And I'm like, oh my God, that's easy, I can do that. And then I started reflecting, Muhammad ﷺ did all 3 of those things. Was he always happy? When they threw stones at him in Taif, was he happy? When his wife Khadija radiallahu anha passes away, was he happy? There are things that will happen to us that we can't control that won't make you necessarily happy. It'll make you content. And so one of my teachers in California always taught me, he says, the problem with human beings is we're aiming to have a happy life, and that's false. We should aim to have a purposeful life. Aim for purposefulness. If you're trying to obtain happiness, you're never going to achieve it. If you get that really awesome job, it's going to stink after a while. You're going to want a better job. If you want to aim to get that Mercedes-Benz and then after a few weeks you're not going to be content with it. You're always going to want more. But if you have purpose, Allah created you with the purpose. We are Khalifa, we are custodians of this earth. So if you're living that purpose, it gives you a sense of contentment. And yes, there are things you can't control that are going to hit you. However, when you have that sense of contentment and purpose, Allah will give you that sakina, that tranquility in your heart. Allah knows best.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's get to Sheikh SULEIMAN.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One of my favorite topics is that of religious self-development. And oftentimes, if you look at the rhetoric and the text and the literature of self-development in the Western world today, we find that generally speaking, most of it is secular. And if we are living in a secular society, consuming constantly secular rhetoric through the news, through media, through entertainment, through the definitions that are being sent out to people. This is what defines success, for you to have A or B or C. When we set those kinds of expectations on our lives as believers, as people who believe in a purpose, as people who believe we will return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are setting the wrong expectations for this life. And in a way, that expectation, because of its underlying foundation and the framework that is incorrect and does not align with one's purpose, oftentimes leads to disappointment, oftentimes leads to depression. Knowing why we were created and aligning everything towards that is the most practical starting point. In a very simple manner, we can say, your life mission statement as a believer is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to please Him. This is as short as it gets, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything you set as a goal in this life, even if you're pursuing studies, secular job, that's fine. But your intention, a conscious intention, that this is for a greater purpose. I am living and I am pursuing so that I can get through this life. I am gaining what I'm gaining in terms of livelihood so that I can support my family, support my community, volunteer here, give charity over there. There are ways for us to give back, to live very purposefully, to add on to what was said, and for us to still be working towards one purpose. In fact, oftentimes there's this confusion, especially amongst the youth, that anything that is not a religious ritual is not an act of worship, such as salah or fasting or reciting the Quran. The reality is your studies and your work and even your social interactions with people, all of that could also be ibadah, but it requires one thing. If it is a permissible action, it requires us to set a conscious intention. That conscious intention drives us beyond the expectations of secular rhetoric. When it comes to religious self-development, we have to make sure our 5-year goals, our 10-year goals, our 30, 50, 100-year goals for the communities, that these things are realistically aligned towards that one purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to know Him and to be pleased through knowing Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let our goals align towards the proper framework. When we have the proper expectation of what this life is made for and created for, our expectations will lead to contentment and in a way, a tranquility in the heart that you cannot find in anything of material wealth. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. That's wonderful. Thank you. And now we'll go to Sister KAMEELAH, please.
Yes. So the perspective that I bring to this question of purpose and of value and of faith is, as a therapist, as a psychologist in training, as someone who builds community around healing spaces, is to really reflect on this question of, at this moment, what do we all know with certainty? This is the question we all know, is that we will return to the Creator. This is one thing that is guaranteed, right? That we are born and then we then return to the one who made us. And so sometimes when we reflect, it's better to do it from the end, right? So if we know at the end that there is death, that there will be the day of judgment, that we will be questioned about our actions. You know, as a therapist, there are times when I will ask my patients to think about this miracle question, right? If all of the problems that you have were solved, you woke up tomorrow, they were all gone, right? Who would you be? What would you be doing? How would you be devoting your time? To what would you put your energy, right? And so to continue or extend that question would be to ask ourselves, if someone were to ask you today to write your obituary, right? At any moment, anyone in this room, right, will return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you were asked to write, what was this person's life about? What did they represent? What was meaningful? What was important? Would we know how to answer that question truthfully? And so part of the process of reflection and of thinking about our values and our purpose is actually to think about what is important to me, right? And not to separate what we may call our secular lives from our spiritual lives or our religious lives, but knowing that these things are constantly intertwined. And so one of the questions that I'm hoping that everybody in this room can begin to ponder is, if none of us knows, right, how much time we have on this earth. So if all of the activities that we're engaged in, the relationships that we have, right, are they all geared towards, I want to be able to stand before my Lord and answer those questions truthfully, honestly, and to say that the things that I did were all for His pleasure. So if we start from that question, we can kind of walk back and say, is my purpose aligned with what I'm doing on a daily basis? And if it is not, then we need to begin a process of reevaluation of what we express to be meaningful to us.
Thank you, Sister KAMEELAH. Very nice of you. Well, from what I heard from you, three of you, mashallah, beautiful. However, you said the purpose of life, said I want to please my Lord, Sheikh SULEIMAN said, I want to please my Lord. You, Sister KAMEELAH said, I want to start with the end. Guys, these guys here who's sitting here, lots of them are young people. They're not really going to be turning their life into religious life and thinking about death and thinking about everything is going to be religious. Is that what we want for our young people here? To be religious? To just understand the purpose of life, that I'm going to stay, I have no fun, I just have to worship Allah, and I have to do everything that pleases Allah, remember death? Is that the message that you're giving me? Is it? What do you think the purpose of life is? Am I going to have fun? Or am I not going to have any fun? Sounds from what you said, there is no place for fun in Islam. What do you say, Ahmed?
So there's a book called The Language of God, and the author is called Francis Collins, and he was an atheist. And he said he was driving one day and he saw a boy drowning in a river. Without thinking, he jumps out of his car, he saves the boy, and then when he comes out, he believed in God. So he left his car not believing in God, and then when he gets out of the river, saving the boy, he believes in God. His perspective was, he didn't think about it, he reacted. And what we would call the fitrah. It was his human instincts that came out of it, of doing good. And so I've been doing youth work pretty much my whole adult life. I always tell the kids, when you pray at the masjid, do you feel bad or good? You feel good. When you fast, do you feel bad or good? You feel good. We are all trying to achieve that goodness feeling within us. And so subhanAllah, that fitrah, that human instinct that Allah installed into us, if we live what Allah is telling us to do and do those good deeds, you're going to have an awesome feeling. Being, you know, subhanAllah, your perspective of what's popular, what's cool, you define it, no one else defines it. There's some of the brothers might be looking at Sheikh SULEIMAN like he's the coolest thing, and there's people that are probably not at the convention that would not look at him like he's the coolest thing. It's your perspective on it. But one thing that Allah has given us is that human instincts, which is our fitrah, human instincts that we have within us, and then when we do good, we feel good. So I tell all the young people, if you want to feel good and you want long-term satisfaction, then do good deeds, because you'll feel it in this life and then you'll feel it in the akhirah. And the thing about sinning, it's temporary satisfaction. That's all it is. It's temporary. It's not going to last. And they're going to feel like, oh my God, what did I do when you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment? So there we go.
Jazakallah khair. Temporary. Very good, mashallah. It's not going to last. Good expressions. But at the end, I want to have fun. Okay? I want my life to be a regular, normal life. I don't want to be called religious. What do you think, Sheikh SULEIMAN, about that? How does it fit with the purpose of life?
Jazakallah khairan for playing angel's advocate. I don't like to say devil's advocate, because who wants to be the devil's advocate? Two things. First, the idea of what religious implies has to be redefined. For you to care so much that people find the idea of religious to be weird or uncool, or that you cannot have fun, or that Islam does not have room for leisure or entertainment with guidelines, it's a very strange concept to anyone who understands the religion properly. I'll give you an example. One of my favorite hobbies is skydiving. And when I say this, a lot of people think it's reckless. It is reckless. Having said that, there is no problem in Islam with looking at all the permissible things in the world. We cannot count the number of things that are permissible, and to actually count the number of things that are prohibited in life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited very few things in this world. The devil, and oftentimes through societies and social constructs in general, would like for you to think that the only cool or fun thing in life are those very few things that are haram. If you had to draw a magnificently large circle and place a small dot in the middle, that small dot and a pixel of that dot and a fraction of that dot would not count the number of things that are considered prohibited by Allah, and they are prohibited for a wisdom known to Him. Some of these things are harmful for us and for society. Everything else in that circle is permissible. Why are we looking at that small dot and trying to be attracted to the small few things that we think define fun? Being fun or having fun is your understanding of fun within the scope of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. You can be the coolest Muslim and the closest person to Allah, and the definition of religious in that context is your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you are not ascribing to other people's definitions of what fun or religious actually means. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Wonderful, mashallah. And Sister KAMEELAH, since you are a psychologist, and you understand the psychology of people, and you go into people's sometimes way of thinking, do you think the way that you presented it, I want to think from the end, it's good, I believe in that. But if we take that into the perspective of a young man or a young woman who doesn't want to be religious, want to have play and have fun and enjoy his or her life, what would you say to them?
Well, one thing I'm going to push back just a little bit,
okay,
because I often hear, especially when adults, right, and I'm no longer a youth, I can say that, there's such an emphasis on, well, the youth are turning away from Islam, or they don't want to be Muslim, they don't want to be religious. But I want to ask the adults, what have you done in your communities and in your families to make the religion something that is filled with joy, compassion, with mercy? Right? That there is something very beautiful about this faith and about living your life in a certain way. And so I think often, at least what I've found in both my professional life and my personal life, is that adults approach the teaching of religion from a very punitive standpoint. Right? It is about what is haram. It is about what you cannot do. And so all of what you're taught is you're supposed to pray 5 times a day, fast, do these things, and a very dogmatic, very filled with, these are all of the negative consequences that will be visited upon you if you do not behave in this way. And so it becomes devoid of what is joyful and what is, I think, just so inspiring and awesome about being Muslim and about following this path. So I think if we, as adults, as teachers, and as people that can also learn from youth, is to begin to think about how do we present, right, the engagement of faith as something that can be filled with fun, that can be filled with things that we can look forward to and we can be hopeful about. And so I think in terms of youth and emerging adulthood, which is one area of expertise of mine, is there's a question that at this age people are asking, right? And you ask yourself throughout your life is, why am I here, right? What does this all mean? It's kind of like an existential question. And I think if we nurture, right, the space for people to begin to explore why they are here and how they connected to kind of a higher purpose, people will be able to find where they get that enjoyment. And so it's not that Islam and enjoying oneself is diametrically opposed, right? I think just when we talk about smiling at one another, spending time with family, laughing and joking with one another, those are also things that can begin to create a space and a community where people feel very comfortable being very unapologetically Muslim.
Great, mashallah. Great, mashallah. Wonderful. Since Brother Sulaiman, Sheikh Sulaiman, studied Islam and spent some time, I want you to shed some light. Was Yusuf alayhi salam in jail religious? Was Musa alayhi salam when he went to Madian, فلما ورد ماء مدين وجد عليه أمة من الناس يسقون ووجد من دونهم امرأتين تذودان. That passage in Surah Al-Qasas and the story of Yusuf alayhi salam there in jail and getting out of jail. How was his life? Was it between two quotes, a religious life. What did he achieve, Yusuf? What did he want to achieve? Is it just I want to worship, pray, and fast? Or is ibadah is much more than that? Please, shed some light on that.
Jazakallah khair. So I kind of alluded to this earlier. The understanding of religious in some people's minds is that you're sitting in the masjid worshiping, or that it's purely ritualistic. It's just pure rituals. Whereas ibadah, worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can be manifested in many different ways. And so for a person to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, love Allah and have hope in Allah wherever they are with their particular circumstances, that is worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can be spending a lot of your time being an active mother, an active father, a young professional, a teenager, active in your community. And you're manifesting worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a different way than the person next to you. There are certain things that are rituals, that are obligations, but the idea of being religious, and these examples from the prophets, alayhi salam, the example from the prophets actually remind us that it was not purely ritualistic. It was not focusing on prayer or fasting every other day, as we know from Dawood alayhi salam. So rather we have here examples of فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Be conscious of Allah as much as you can, meaning with your circumstances in life. If you're a young man or a young woman in this country, know that you have a blessing and a responsibility. Be conscious of Allah with those responsibilities. And the reality of this, and I think this ties in the last few things we've said all together, it's important for us to realize that there is a concept of spiritual responsibility. We oftentimes want our children to be responsible. We want them to learn responsibility, whether it's in the home or with their studies. And if they say to us, if we say to one another, I don't feel like studying this semester, I just want to have fun, the response is, well, you might fail the exam. And this is a very realistic, worldly response. If you want something done properly, there is an element of responsibility. And yes, responsibility does not sound like a fun word, but there's a joy in it when we understand what's beyond it, when we understand what's behind it, when we understand the purpose in it. There is a Jannah in this life, and it's not a material thing that you can buy. It's found in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through all of these different ways. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Beautiful, MashaAllah. And my dear brother Ahmed here, I want to go to the gym. I want to play sports. I want to watch games. Is this against Islam?
So, you know, I'm not joking with you. I was going to give an example before he asked me that question. Wallahi was dealing with basketball. Wallahi it was.
What was it?
It was dealing with basketball. I was going to give you an example. So I was in the Orland Park community for about 8 years doing youth work. And as I left, alhamdulillah, one of my kids who became an adult was taking over the halaqah, right? He was taking it over. He speaks better than me. He studied Arabic. He was way better than me. And I said, the only thing that you need to work on is your basketball game. And I told you, I was straight up with him. I'm like, you'll get ajr for it. You'll get hasanat for it, which is kind of weird, right? I'm like, you need to use that as a tool to do da'wah. In our community, predominantly Middle Eastern, either the kids are at the barbershop or at the gym, at Lifetime Fitness. That's where they're at. So you literally just need to go to those two places. In California, it's a totally different game. They're all over. You can't find them in a specific location. So I'm like, if you learn how to play basketball and you play with them and you're good, you then can recruit them to come to the halaq, come to youth programs. And that's where it's at. And I feel that Allah has blessed me with a good jump shot. So there are times where I would play the kids and I would tell them straight up, we're going to play one-on-one. And if I win, you have to come to the halaqah for 6 weeks. I'm not joking with you. Some of those kids have taken it to a different level. Because even like there are individuals that will be brought into chains into Jannah. They're not looking, but Allah guided them and pushed them to Jannah. And so it's nothing wrong with playing basketball. And I'll leave it with this last example. I gave a talk here 2 years ago about our youth. And a mother came to me and said, my son plays video games. What do I do about it? I'm like, play video games with them. Depends on the video games. But play video games with them. My son, who's sitting in the second row right now, he loves superheroes. I can never get down with superheroes. It didn't make sense to me. If it's not real, why would I follow it? But I do my due diligence to understand every single superhero, because I want to make sure we have a bond. So when I'm connecting with him and I'm like, well, let's go to the masjid after we watch this, Iron Man, he'd be like, okay, Baba. So find that connection. And I think within myself, to understand Iron Man and Batman and Superman and whatever superhero there is of the day, I actually think I'm going to get rewarded for it. Actually, I have no doubt I'm going to be rewarded for it, because I'm going to use that as a dawah technique for my son. So we have to understand that, and I think Sheikh SULEIMAN addressed it. It is rituals that we do, but sometimes there's other worships that we do that we don't think they're worships, but they are. So we have to understand and realign our understanding of what ibadah truly means.
Good, mashallah, mashallah. Great, great, mashallah. And Sister KAMEELAH, since you're doing your PhD, you see, that's great. Is there a room in Islam to achieve the top? I want to come to the top. I want to be top of the top. Is there a room in Islam? Or we just take the regular jobs and I don't really look for the highest position or the highest achievements? What do you think Islam encourages you to do?
I think what we are taught in Islam is to do everything that we do to the best of our ability. But what we have to be careful of is how much of what we're doing is for others to recognize us, right? For the accolades, for the accomplishments, for the awards, or what we're doing sincerely, again, aligning what we're doing and what we're hoping to achieve with asking ourselves the question, is this going to be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so I can say very clearly, and I know my family and other people that know me know this, I'm an overachiever, right? That I want to do well, and I take great pride in the work that I do, but in pursuing those achievements and making those milestones, it is because I know that I will have to answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did I give 100% to what I'm doing? Is the effort that I'm putting forth representative of my faith in Him? If I'm encountering an obstacle or a challenge, am I going to say to myself, Allah has already written for me, right, what is for me? So, but it is still my responsibility to be able to give all that I have, all of the talents and the strengths that He has bestowed me with. Am I putting that into that activity, into that paper, into the training that I'm receiving? Because ultimately what I'm doing is in service of my community. So I want to do well, because when I do well, I know my community, my family will do well. And so those are the kinds of thoughts that guide my actions around achievement. It's not simply what I'm hoping to do as an individual.
Good, good. The psychology of our community, everybody wants to be a doctor, okay?
Not
everybody wants to
necessarily.
be this. You ask some of the people here, they'll tell you. So knowing the psychology of the Muslim community, how do you fit making the highest achievement with Islam?
Well, but again, I'm going to ask the adults, not necessarily the youth, is when we're pushing our children to be high achievers and attain those kinds of professions, is it for status, right? Is it for materialistic gain? Is it so that someone could say, oh, mashallah, my son is a doctor, my daughter is a scientist? Are those the reasons? Or do we know that the community needs all kinds of people from all walks of life to pursue different goals? And so if someone is an educator, honestly, I don't know if there's a more important job than someone who is entrusted to teach others, right? And so how do we lift up that as a profession that is noble, right, that people should want to pursue? And so when we narrowly define what people should be doing, it's often in service of what can I do to brag and to boast? But if we're doing it in service of, again, is this going to be helpful and beneficial to my family and to my community? And will Allah be pleased with this action?
Yes.
That's where we have to
Good,
think
mashallah,
about those questions.
mashallah. Great, great, mashallah, mashallah. And Sheikh SULEIMAN, I want to ask you, we want to build some background. With your background in Islamic studies and Islam, we have a lot of people who think, why would Islam interfere in the way I dress? Okay? In the way I lead my life. I just want to be free. I want to deal with my life the way I want to. I want to dress the way I like. I want to walk the way I like. Okay? What does religion have to do with that? Why would I have to fit myself in a religious pattern? How does this fit with Surah Al-An'am, for example?
Jazakallah khairan. I want to break this down into 3 different premises that are a little problematic. And I love the way that you approach this, mashallah. The first is we have to distinguish between religion and culture. We have to distinguish between these two, because the problems of culture, when they are used to hijack the religion or used as a disguise for religion, oftentimes lead to the violation of people's rights. Whether it is women in some communities, whether it is parents with their children, whether it is a specific community around the world, there is a massive distinction between Islam and culture. And if we do not continue to address these differences and learn about these differences, we're going to lead ourselves to a lot of problems, some of the problems that were mentioned in this question. The second matter, for someone to say, I just want to be free. I just want to be free. What does this really entail? Does this not entail a form of liberalism, in that it is a worship of one's desires and a lack of submission to Allah? If there is something that Allah stipulated and it is explicitly and it is actually part of Islam and not just a cultural thing, then we have to understand very clearly that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in Surah Al-Baqarah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ادْخُلُوا فِي السِّلْمِ كَافَّةً وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. O believers, Allah is talking to you and I, He's speaking to us. O believers, enter into submission, into Islam, into these commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's going to require effort, yes, that's what submission entails. We do not conform Islam to our desires. We conform our desires to Islam. And I'll give you a very simple example, and some of you have heard this story before because I've shared it many times. As someone who comes from Dearborn, Michigan, it's not uncommon to hear this question. A man comes to our masjid and asks, what's the ruling on smoking argile? The water pipe, the hookah? I know you guys are all aware of what I'm referring to. And I gave him my answer, and then I asked, because I had not seen him before, from which community are you? Are you a traveler? Are you from out of state? He said, I'm from such and such masjid. It's about 30 minutes from where I am. I said, oh, mashallah, you have Imam so-and-so over there. Why didn't you ask him, for his ruling on this? He said, I did. And I asked 5 other Imams in the city, and they all said it was prohibited. I said, then why are you asking me? He said, I thought you might say it's halal, it's permissible. I said, brother, this is literally fatwa shopping. You're looking for someone to tell you that what you're doing is okay because you do not want to face the reality that maybe what you're doing is not okay. We have to be cautious and honest with ourselves. If we want to make progress, whether you're old or young, does not matter from where we hail. If we think just about the example of Adam alayhi salam, when they were condemned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they responded, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. We wronged ourselves. They accepted responsibility. They asked Allah for forgiveness. They moved on. And they got closer to Allah through it. Whereas the devil did the opposite. He blamed Allah. He said, بِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي. Meaning, you have made me err. You have made a mistake. Why? Because you created Adam alayhi salam. We have to learn to accept that there is going to be a sense of responsibility, a sense of submission, and at times, yes, it's going to contradict what society is telling us to do, but real liberation and real freedom is to free ourselves from the shackles of immorality and back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. MashaAllah. Wonderful. How does this fit? I want you to continue in your discussion for the sake of educating our audience here. How does this fit with the verse, قُلْ أَغَيْرَ اللَّهِ أَبْغِي رَبًّا وَهُوَ رَبُّ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ? The conclusion of Surah Al-An'am. قُلْ أَغَيْرَ اللَّهِ أَبْغِي رَبًّا وَهُوَ رَبُّ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. Am I going to take other than Allah as my Lord, and He's the Lord of everything? How does what you said fit with this verse?
We can actually add on to this. أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَى. Do you see the one who takes his Lord, his God, his desires basically as the one to worship. Both of these we can address simultaneously by saying that if you are not choosing to submit to the one who created you, and you're not willing to put in the effort to fulfill your purpose, there is something or someone else you are submitting to. It could be your own desires. It could be something society is calling to. It could be a manifestation of different forms of immorality, different trends that are rising and falling, isms that come and go all the time. We have to realize eventually that if we reflect, and this is to add on to what was stated earlier about real reflection, which leads to self-actualization. Real reflection helps us to know our purpose and to shed away all these shackles that are basically different forms of worship. Whether it is a worship of one's ego, or one's arrogance, or one's pride, or society, or one's family, or one's culture. All of these could be, in different ways, forms and manifestations of worship. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Great. Well, I want to talk to you, the audience here. Do you think they are talking so high that they don't really realize the level of the average person in the community? Is this talk that they presented to us so high that it does not reach the average person? Or is it? Please, if you agree that it is so high, say yes. MashaAllah, that's good news for you. That's great. Okay. Then let's get to Ahmed, since he was raised here. You know the people in the street, know the average child, for example, the average young man, and how they feel. How do you give them a message about what we have here today? If I ask you to give that message to a person who doesn't pray, to a person who doesn't know the Quran, to a person who doesn't know anything about Islam except I am a Muslim, my parents are Muslim, what would you say?
So I'm looking at the crowd right now. I don't see any young people. I don't. So I'll just talk to you guys. So I'll just be, okay, there's a couple young people. But I'm going to talk to, I would gauge you guys are above the age of 18 and older. So do you always hear like massages are hiring youth directors? Or they're trying to now? And it's coming. There's a part where massages want to do their part right now. And I'm going to just say to you right now, if we want to fix the community to become better, it's going to be all on us. And so if we're concerned about individuals not praying and not knowing the Quran and so forth, let's not repeat that cycle. And this is very easy. So it's actually interesting. If you look at the story of Yusuf, alayhi salam, when he's found in the well, the travelers saw him. They realized, oh, good news, we have a young boy with us. And so you could see they knew the value of this boy, but they knew they could take advantage of him. So I used to work for Kellogg's, the cereal company. I'm gonna say something to you that's gonna blow your mind. So Kellogg's actually pays for space at the cereal aisle. And they don't want to put it in the bottom of the shelf. They want to put it in the middle of the shelf. And if you ever look at the animations on the cereal boxes, look at the eyes of the animation. They're actually looking down. And why are they looking down? They want to make eye contact with the kids. And so it's actually interesting. You have PhDs in marketing working for these type of companies because they want to understand. They know, quite frankly, if we can get a child at that age, we have a customer for life. If you look at even like you go to Walmart, what is the most beautiful aisle at Walmart? It's the liquor aisle. Inside of it's poison, but the packaging is beautiful. And so sometimes we don't know the value of our youth and our young people. And so hiring a youth director at a masjid is not going to just do it. And so if we as an ummah collectively want to make the society better, it's on all of us. And I remember when I was young, I used to go to the Mosque Foundation in Bridgeview. Sheikh Jamal said something really profound that I didn't realize until I got older. He says, you guys that are in your 20s, you coming to the masjid does a lot. Even if you don't even say one word. You are going to the masjid at 21, 22. That boy that's being forced to come at the masjid at the age of 7 is going to look up to you. So just do your part and do yourself a favor when you see someone at the masjid that's young, a young sister, a young brother, go and talk to them. Don't even have to mention anything about Islam. Talk about basketball. Talk about whatever. Imagine if someone's 8 or 9 years old and he's talking to someone double his age and they're talking about the current events of life or about that sports team. He's going to want to yearn to come to the masjid more often, and Islam will quickly settle in. And inshallah, we won't have that problem where people are not praying as much or people are not understanding the Quran. Let's fix that problem, but it's all on us. It's not my job, it's all our jobs. Allahu Akbar.
Jazakallah khair. MashaAllah. Beautiful, MashaAllah. Great. And Sister KAMEELAH, you excuse me. You counsel a lot of people, and this is your job. A Muslim young man comes to you, or a young woman comes to you, and says to you, I don't know anything about Islam. I'm a Muslim. How would you help that Muslim young man or a woman build their identity and understand the message that we want to send today? What would you say? What would you do?
Well, the first thing I would do is actually commend that young person for being honest. Because I often encounter young people who feel that they should perform a level of piety that they don't really feel inside, right? But it's all for kind of appearance's sake. And even if you're born into a Muslim family, into Muslim parents, at some point in your life, you have to choose, right? This is not about the people who convert to Islam and have, kind of this really transformative experience. At some point in everyone's life, we have to choose that there's no God but Allah, right? And Muhammad is his messenger. We all have to. And so the first question I would ask is, what are they curious about, right? If some of the shame and the guilt that they may feel, we can kind of set that to the side for a second. What are they curious about? What do they want to know, right? What has been confusing, right? Because often we don't create enough spaces for young people to explore and to ask these really what may seem remedial or basic questions, because they think, well, I should know this already. So I have to pretend that I have this information, that I have this knowledge, when I really don't. And I think that compounds some of the anxiety and the guilt, to be honest. And so I think for that young woman or that young man is, one, to commend them, to ask them what they're curious about, ask them what they have found challenging, and what do they need of their family and their community in order to begin a process of exploration that feels affirming, right? Not punishing.
Yes. Very good, mashallah. Great. I want to ask Sheikh SULEIMAN here. Well, the vast majority, I was talking to a friend of mine, Dr. Hatim, and he explained that he's worried. There are too many people who are not committed. And he just went on to say the majority, actually, of the Muslims in the USA are not committed. And we're losing the generations who don't understand the message that we're trying to say today and express in this session that we have. And I remember yesterday we had a talk, and we were talking about the Prophet ﷺ following one of two approaches. Either you stand high and tell the people, come to me. Here is the level that I want you to achieve. It's that high. You gotta come to me, okay? Or you go down to them, dive with them, and push them up to reach the level where they should be. Which approach the Prophet ﷺ would use? And which approach would we recommend here for ourselves, for the parents who are sitting here, for the young people who are crying for help? What should we do? Please.
Jazakallah khairan. One of the things we look at, and it's one of the most beautiful reflections on the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and we can actually take a lot of psychological methodologies from the life of the Prophet ﷺ in how he nurtured people. And so the first thing we keep in mind is that no two people are alike. No two people are approached in the same exact manner. So someone might be motivated by one thing, whereas the person next to them needs a different approach. This applies to parents with their kids. This applies to communities. This applies to masajid with their methodologies, the different programs that they're offering. Go down to people's levels, offer them things that they understand, speak to people on their level. Absolutely. The second is that the Prophet ﷺ understood people's personalities. And so way before there was personality theory, the Prophet ﷺ would know that, for example, he would speak to Mu'adh radiallahu anh in a famous report, a dua that we all know. And he advised him and he said, "Oh Mu'adh, by Allah, I love you." This is how his advice began. "Oh Mu'adh, by Allah, I love you." He's flattering Mu'adh radiallahu anh. So do not forget to say after every prayer, "Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik." Oh Allah, help me to remember you often, to praise you often, and to worship you in the best manner possible. The Prophet ﷺ's advice to different companions shows us how he knew the companions really well. Know the people you're approaching. And this goes back to what Brother Ahmed mentioned earlier, which is very important. Our masajid need to also be aligned towards this life purpose we're discussing here. If the people running our mosques all around the country are not on a similar wavelength in terms of this vision, it's going to create inconsistencies in how we nurture our communities. And so if the right people are not aligning that community or that masjid or that mosque or that youth center towards this vision, we will find inconsistencies and gaps in some places. We will find youth facing all types of violations, things that are not really religious, things that are problematic. We will find if mosques are being controlled by donors who say, "Take this check, but I also will be running this mosque and I do not pray." This is problematic. If you're giving sadaqah, give sadaqah, but don't add strings to it. Don't add anything to it. We need our communities to be purified of all types of cultural biases, all types of influences of politics or power, so we can realign towards this life objective. And this, as a result, all across the country, will benefit our youth for perhaps 500 or 1,000 years down the road. Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair. MashaAllah, beautiful. Good, very good. And Ahmed, you dived with the people here, right?
I try to. I
You
try
tried
to.
Okay. You lived with them. You've seen their life. Would you dive with them? And now, alhamdulillah, you are in a different position. Would you follow the helicopter approach and tell them to come to you? Or did you go down to the streets and dive with them and push them up?
So, I mean, the way I look at my strategic planning is that I would examine the Prophet ﷺ's life. And so it's really interesting when I was studying the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and you know, when he gets wahi for the first time and the experience is really tough, and Khadija radiallahu anha says some beautiful words to them and some words of encouragement, never once did she say, "You're a good speaker." The Prophet ﷺ was never known prior to Islam to being an eloquent speaker. He wasn't a poet. Abu Bakr was not a poet. However, their da'wah was far-reaching compared to Suhail ibn Amr, let's say, or Ka'b ibn Malik, who are known as poets. So we have this tendency, which is really perverted, I think, and it's not a good understanding. In order to be like a good da'i, you have to speak very well. I totally disagree with that. People, I don't know, I think it was Sheikh Walid Basuni that said it, maybe it's another famous speaker. People don't care how much you know, people don't care how much you know until they realize how much you care. And so when you care about someone and there's a bond, then your words become extremely heavy on them. And so like the way I would look at it, and I still teach middle school. I'm 36 years old and I'll still do it until I'm 50 if Allah gives me a life, or 60. I love doing it. And the way I do it is what's concerning them in their life and start talking to them in their level. And that's what we need to do, is never to like, hey, I'm gonna save you. No, I'm gonna get down and dirty. I'm gonna play basketball, I'm gonna play games, I'm gonna understand what's happening in your school, you're getting bullied, whatever it may be. Understand what you're going through and let's talk about it. And care for them, ask them questions, how's everything with your parents? Understand their concerns and make it your concerns. Be empathetic, not sympathetic. Empathetic, put yourself in their shoes, realize their concerns, and wallahi, when you say something, and you give them da'wah, and you talk about salah, they will listen. But if there's not a connection, it's going to be very, 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 unfortunately, not going to have the same effect.
Jazakallah khair. It's wonderful, great. And Sister KAMEELAH, Allah tells us the beginning of the Quran. In page maybe 4 of the Quran, the message that we are the Khalifa of Allah on earth. We want to conclude with that. So, being the Khalifa of Allah, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. the angels wondered. Allah tells them, I will create a vice-regent, a Khalifa, and put him on the earth. And they wondered, are you going to create somebody who's going to, you know, kill others, and shed blood, and, you know. And Allah told him, I know what you know not. So it's a wonderful message. It's a noble message that we have. How do you fit that into your counseling ideas and into the ideas that we have for this session?
Well, I think one of the important questions, I want to kind of revisit the question that you asked before about whether we stand on high or we're with people. I think it's also important to ask people what they already know, instead of assuming that we're coming with so much knowledge and information and that we're going to enrich their lives, but understanding that it's reciprocal. That as I'm with people, I'm also learning more about myself, that I'm learning more about them and what they need, and also what their strengths are, right? How the ways that they've been resilient. And so I think to kind of wrap up the session for me is to understand where people are, who are they striving to become, how we can align their vision for themselves and integrate that with faith is always a part of that question, right? It's not separate and distinct, that we do religion here and we do other things here. And so wondering, especially with youth, what do they already appreciate? What do they already know? How and in what ways do they want to contribute to our communities, and how can we lift up their vision for what this community could be and should be, inshallah. And so I think it's very important for adults, for educators, for parents to really think about what can I also learn from young people, right? What do they also have to offer? And then what can I do to help them enrich their lives? Because ultimately it will be beneficial for the entire community.
Very good, mashallah. And Sheikh Sulaiman, if you would make a conclusion on that message, yes.
On this question?
Yes.
In general, my closing remarks, because we do have to wrap up. Whatever you're struggling with, whoever you are, whatever you're struggling with, know that there are people that genuinely care about your struggles in your community. They care about you fulfilling your purpose. They care about you valuing the blessings that you have. They care about you reaching a greater potential version of yourself. Know that there are people who care, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares, and that you should never stop trying. As for those who are able to commit to helping others, those who are valuing their blessings, knowing that you are a part of the community, as Brother Ahmed mentioned earlier, you can also contribute, and every one of us has a role to play. Every person at this convention has a different role to play. If we all play to that role, and we all try to align towards that purpose, by Allah, we would see the results of that, as we are seeing already, alhamdulillah, in this generation, in this life, before the next life. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make all of us of people who are constantly using our blessings to bring others and ourselves closer to Him and to our purpose. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Brother Ahmed, want to say anything?
Yeah, I'll conclude with a very simple story, really quick. Let's just say this is 2016, and let's say Barack Obama is going to give someone a Mercedes-Benz. There's 3 types of people that will take that car. There'll be one person that will take that car, and they'll take it, don't say thank you, and they'll drive that car around. There'll be a second type of person that will say thank you, Barack, and then just drive around. And then there's a third type of person that'd be like, why did the President of the United States give me a car? I think he wants me to come to the White House. And it's the exact same thing with the gifts that Allah gives us. We all have gifts. Some of us just take those gifts, we're not thankful. There's some that will say alhamdulillah, and there's others that will take those gifts to return back to God. You guys decide which 3 do you want to be.
Jazakallah khair. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Well, Jazakumullah khair. In conclusion, I just want to, what I learned from our speakers here, Islam could be your lifestyle. Islam is my lifestyle. I'm normal. As my speakers here, distinguished speakers, indicated to us. Islam is my lifestyle. Different people here have different lifestyles. I woke up early, I pray, and then I go about my regular life. I go to the masjid as my lifestyle. I pray again, but I go play soccer, I go play basketball or whatever. I go to my work. I make the highest achievements in my work. And Allah instructed us, saying to us, وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, at the end of Surah Al-Furqan. Oh Allah, make us leaders for the righteous, top of the top. If there are good people, I want to be top. I want to be a leader for those good people. It's a vision. وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. That goes hand in hand with وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. You can't separate them from each other. While we are achieving the highest goals, we have our own lifestyle. But we do respect other people's lifestyle. That's who we are in the USA, as Muslims who respect others and show respect of others people's freedom to practice the religion or even practice no religion. We are strong believers that our lifestyle is a good style, is a clean style. Part of my lifestyle, I don't eat pork. Part of my lifestyle, I dress in a certain way. Part of my lifestyle, I visit the masjid on a daily basis. But I'm still normal. I am a normal person. There is nothing called religious. We all are religious in a way or another. We all are normal people. And that is the message that my dear brothers and my dear sister here wanted to convey to you. I hope and pray that the purpose of life is clear. I hope and pray that we all get out of here with the message that we are normal people doing the best thing one can do. وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Jazakum Allah khair. And please applaud the speakers here. May Allah reward you and them, inshallah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wal asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.